I am Carol Angela Davis. Welcome to Impact News. Thanks for joining us this week. We're bringing you all the news you need to know about the environment, about the diaspora, and about everything else that touches our lives. And today we're going to start with the story about the environment because we're hearing more, and your food, by the way. We're hearing more and more about those deadly PFAS chemicals. Now we hear they're present at potentially dangerous levels, okay? And in some of the United States' most widely used chemicals that are sprayed on food crops. That's right, folks, they end up on your plate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All right, one expert at the Center for Biological Diversity says, I can't imagine anything that could make these products any more dangerous than they already are, but apparently my imagination isn't big enough, unquote. That's pretty serious. Experts want the pesticides removed from use until contamination can be addressed. Now, in 2021, you should know that is the most recent year the data is available. More than 1.7 million pounds of it were applied to over 1.3 million cumulative acres of California land. And of course, remember that the Central Valley in California is where 25% of America's food is grown, folks. And that's where the use was highest in the Central Valley on crops. We're talking almonds, we're talking grapes, we're talking pistachios, and peaches. Yes, full of forever chemicals. And we know what those forever chemicals are. PFAS, that's what they're called. They're about a class of about 15,000 chemicals that are often used to make thousands of consumer products across dozens of industries to make them resist water, stains, and heat, folks. They are linked at very, very low levels of exposure to cancer, thyroid disease, autoimmune disease, kidney dysfunction, birth defects, and other very serious health problems, folks. They're called forever chemicals because they just don't break down naturally. So we have to put our foot down on the PFAS chemicals because we're eating them every day. And frankly, they're killing us. And we have to put our foot down and make sure that we elect people who are going to put those chemicals used to a stop until they can address ways to deal with the contamination. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Stay with me. I am Carol Angela Davis. Thank you for staying with me on Impact News. We're going to start with some news of the largest, or I should say the third largest home builder in the country. That would be Pulte Homes. Now, Black employees are now suing Pulte Homes. That's right, folks. They say CEO Ryan Marshall, well, they say he and other senior executives engaged in racial discrimination, folks. Also conspiracy and a lynching news meeting, if you can believe that. That's what they're saying, folks. Apparently, it's all supposed to be part of a conspiracy to reward personal loyalty over merit, and in some cases, white employees over Black employees. Well, we've seen that before. Reportedly, Pulte CEO Ryan Marshall's managers used a noose at a meeting with Black employees in an effort to create an unworkable environment. And when the Black employees complained, you know what happened, folks? They were written up and subsequently fired. That's right. Okay, Pulte. All right, let's move on to a formerly homeless Black teen who's going to graduate as her class valedictorian. Her name is Jasmine Mazard Larry. She's a high school valedictorian from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Her family lost their home in a fire. Her father died. She became homeless, obviously, and still graduated at the top of her class. Go ahead, Jasmine. All right, folks. In addition to her academic accomplishments, she also volunteers in her community, and she also plays in the marching band. So where is she going? She's going to Louisiana State University in the fall, where she's going to study biochemistry. Go, girl. All right, moving on, the racial discrimination out here is just over the top, folks. Iconic civil rights attorney Ben Crump, well, thankfully, he's suing Morgan Stanley, alleging an institutional bias against Black people. Morgan Stanley is one of the world's largest, as we all know, financial services firms. Attorney Crump says the company participated in a long-standing pattern of systemic racial discrimination, the lawsuit being filed on behalf of Anthony Fletcher. So who was he? He was a recruiter and he was contracted to hire Black talent there at Morgan Stanley. He did that for 7 years up until 2022. He says, among other things, Morgan Stanley would place some of the diverse hires he brought in into lower paying roles at the firm. He also says the firm went behind his back to hire his people and avoid paying him his fee. Oh, yeah. He says when he reported the discrimination he and his candidates faced, you know what happened. His contract was terminated and the company hired a white male in order to replace him. Crump says Morgan Stanley has been Crump, the lawyer, our lawyer, says Morgan Stanley has a long history of discrimination against black employees. Well, let's put a stop to it. Also, an FYI, folks, those who are out there trying to somehow talk negatively against Kamala Harris, well, guess what? We know that now that young voters overwhelmingly approve of Vice President Kamala Harris, and that is very important because Gen Z voters' electoral presence next year in the presidential election is expected to be pivotal and could prove to make all the difference come election day. So you go, Gen Z. You know who's out here pushing for you, and you know who isn't. Then let's go to Candace Owens. Sweetie Pie has not changed, folks. The conservative commentator says she has no sympathy for Jordan Neely. You remember him because, of course, he was killed on a New York City subway train, placed in a chokehold until he died by a 24-year-old white Marine. And Candace Owens, says she has no sympathy for Jordan Neely. Well, who's surprised? Because the question is not only does she not have any sympathy for Jordan Neely, does she have any empathy at all for anybody who's black? All right, let's move on. Looking at your health, the U.S. Surgeon General says this. He says loneliness is as deadly, get this, as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. We're talking about the Surgeon General. His name is Vivek Murthy, Dr. Vivek Murthy. That's what he says. He says that the mortality impact of loneliness is even greater than that associated with obesity and lack of physical activity. Wow. Okay. He says evidence across scientific disciplines converges on the conclusion that socially connected people live longer. And he also says and points out the number of single-person households, saying it has doubled since 1960, which he says contributes to why a significant portion of Americans have no adequate social connection. All right, several examples of the harms. And we're talking a lot about technology, of course, because it displaces in-person engagement, it monopolizes our attention, and it reduces the quality of our interactions and even diminishes our self-esteem. And we know that's true because our girls are in trouble thanks to that social media. All right, let's move on. Let's look at the climate. Taking a look at Vietnam. Vietnam had its highest ever temperature, folks, at 111 degrees, okay? The same is true of Bangladesh, Laos, and Myanmar, all of them having terrible temperatures. Workers say they have to finish their outdoor work by 10 a.m., in order to avoid the heat. These are the hottest summer months in Vietnam, but the intensity of the heat is beyond what anyone normally gets there. Also in India, authorities there say parts of the country are experiencing temperatures that are 3 to 4 degrees above normal. All right, let's look at the epic snowfall in the west here of the United States. It's starting to melt and the flood danger is pretty serious. It's rising in California's Central Valley. That's where about a quarter of the nation's food is grown. Already runoff snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada has overwhelmed waterways, flooded farms, and orchards. And you should know that right now the Northern Sierra snow water content is 198% above normal. The central region is 238% above normal, and the southern Sierra is 296% above normal. That's a lot of snow that has to melt. It's going to come off the mountains at some point, and probably in late June or in July in California, causing flash flooding and also landslides. All right, let's go to the glaciers. A scientist studying one of Greenland's largest glacier, that's the Petermann Glacier. They say it's melting far faster than they expected, and they say that means that other ocean glaciers in both Greenland and Antarctica could also contribute to sea level rise much more quickly than expected and also much faster. They say sea rise could potentially double what is currently expected from the glaciers, and the Petermann Glacier alone, okay, if it all melts, could raise global sea levels by 1 foot. All right, moving on to the diaspora, the Prime Minister of Caribbean nation St. Kitts and Nevis says his country is not totally free as long as King Charles III remains head of state. Okay, Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew, he says this. He would welcome an apology from the monarchy for its historic links to the slave trade. Folks, St. Kitts and Nevis, they were the first Caribbean islands that English colonizers settled permanently. And of course, their fortune there in the UK was built upon sugar and slavery. And of course, that legacy lingers today. Now, you're not going to believe this. Well, of course, first of all, let's start with the fact that there's widespread support in the Caribbean for compensation for the descendants of enslaved Africans. And you should know this. Check them out. This is how willing they are to pay reparations. In 2015, British taxpayers finished paying off the debt reparations, which the government incurred to compensate British slave owners, yes, after abolition in 1833. And folks, they paid the slave owners reparations, but they don't want to pay the people who they enslaved and whose wealth they took. That's disgraceful. Those are your stories. Stay with me. The slave word of the week, folks. It's time for you to be able to level up your vocab, increase your vocabulary, make sure you're out there hitting it like you know you can. The word this week is dowdy. D-O-U-G-H-T-Y, dowdy. That's right, folks. It's an adjective, which means it modifies or describes a noun, and it does come from the Old English in the 11th century. Wow. All right, the definition is brave and persistent. All right, here's our sentences for the slave word dowdy. Despite many personal challenges this year, her dowdy work in her academics earned her the spot of valedictorian. Here's your second sentence. The actions of many Republicans show that they are dowdy and loyal to a fault to Donald Trump, and they will pay for it because, as the book says, everything Trump touches dies, and that's certainly been proven out. Dowdy. That's your slave word of the week, D-O-U-G-H-T-Y. It means brave and persistent. Level up that vocab.
Anyone who thinks that slavery ended in the 1860s with the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation are grievously wrong.
If we caught a bird, we ate through the feathers and ate the bird. We didn't have nothing to cook on. We didn't have no stove.
You know who you are and who we are.
We're still on the big plantation.
She was bonded to them until they died. She was their slave.
They said, well, we're going to be killed tonight.
Could that same white dude keep terrorists there? Or Russian spies? Or the KGB? And the government wouldn't know it? No.
They thought I was beat so bad that I couldn't do nothing, but I did.
Where are you? We're out there looking for you. We need the help of the community to consistently be focused on these young girls' faces and help us find them. Have you seen 15-year-old Anaya Gayton? She's been missing since February this year from Dallas, Texas. That's Anaya Gayton. She's 15 years old. She's been missing since February of this year from Dallas, Texas. Anyone having any information, please contact McKinney Police Department, and their phone number is 972-547-2700. Where are you? We want you to know, and your family to know, we're out there looking for you. Thanks for staying with us. This is the International Report. You, of course, get it every week with Dr. Inyang Ebon-Hersham. Ini, welcome.
Thank you, Carol. I have some good news today for a change. WHO, the head of WHO, has declared an end to COVID-19 as a global health emergency. He said it is with great hope that he declares an end to COVID-19 as a public health emergency, stressing, though, that it does not mean that there won't be new variants and new threats within the context of this disease. But the emergency as we knew it, that drove us all into our houses, that shut down offices, that shut down companies, that put more people into poverty, it's over.
That's fantastic. I just, we wore the mask, we took the jab, we did what we had to do. And unfortunately, a lot of people died, but a lot of people didn't.
But it's interesting because the cumulative cases worldwide now stand at 765,222,932 people died of this disease. And there were, at least the cases, and then 7 million deaths. There were 7 million deaths.
All over the world.
All over the world.
1 million here in the United States, and they're still saying that they're looking at now the numbers are way higher in terms of communities of color for not from dying of COVID, but from dying from something that COVID caused.
Right, and that he does point that out, that that is not to say that there aren't people that are living with the long-term effect of this disease. And he does point out that is not to say that we won't see new variants and new surges, but the technology that came with the vaccines and the way they were able to produce the vaccines to respond to the variants is something that we have to be very grateful for.
That was shocking that all over the world we got together and ended up quickly with a vaccine.
Exactly. And, you know, it was interesting, the role of the South. I always like to talk about the global South. Cuba sent doctors, you know, to Italy, to the United Kingdom. India sent medicines to the point where when India was hit by its wave, it didn't have enough medicines to treat themselves. So you saw some very, very interesting things happening globally that you would not have thought would be possible. The South was able to stand up and help the North.
Yes. So hopefully, if there's another pandemic, and we know with climate change there's likely to be, hopefully leadership in the United States will act faster and with more seriousness. Because remember, when COVID first came out, remember that then President Trump said it would be gone in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And nothing was done. And they lost valuable time and lost valuable lives.
Because I think we learned that, and that's the key, that the point that you just made, Annie, time really mattered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it's amazing because I remember those days of 2020, 2021. It was awful, Carol. Now, the one thing that I do recall and think very fondly of is the amazing effect it had on the environment. When we all stopped, the planes stopped, the cars stopped, the trains stopped, the people.
Water got clear.
Oh, it was amazing. It was such an amazing, but it was an amazing statement. That is what it took to get our environment into some kind of shape.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably what it's going to take going forward. So people see that it can happen. Thank you so much. Your international report with Dr. Inyang Ebon-Hershuk. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Stay with me.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, it's time for the financial news so we can know what's going on out there in the world of finances. We're going to take a look at Black employment. You should know that in April, Black employment dipped to 4.7%. That is the lowest such level in government records dating all the way back to 1972. The overall unemployment rate, well, it dipped to 3.4% as employers added 253,000 jobs in April. That does show evidence that the labor market still shows some resilience despite rising interest rates, of course, the inflation, and a banking crisis that we're still not sure is over. The overall unemployment rate, you should know, is at a 54-year low. That's according to the U.S. Labor Department. Job growth was particularly strong among healthcare companies, also restaurants and bars, and a broad category that includes managers, administrators, and technical support workers. Average hourly wages, well, they rose by 0.5% from March to April, nearly twice what economists had expected. Also, in your financial news, Shaq, you know, I love Shaq, okay? Shaq, 50 Cent, and Kenya Barris, they represent the latest group trying to buy BET. Apparently, Paramount Global wants to sell non-core assets such as a majority share in BET. Barris is already a minority stakeholder in BET Studios. That's the production division of BET. And he's a minority stakeholder in BET Studios along with Rashida Jones and Aaron Rashawn Thomas. BET Media Group owns VH1 and BET Cable Networks and the BET Plus streaming service. Byron Allen, as you know, he owns the Griot, and he along with actor-producer Tyler Perry, who also owns a minority stake in BET Plus streaming device, they also plan to build for BET Media Group. I think the important thing is that BET gets back in the hands where it belongs so that we can not only showcase the positive aspects of our community, but also add to the diverse voices out there. Stay with me.
I'm just sick and tired of us not spending time together lately.
I know, baby. I know. I'm sorry I ain't been spending time with you. I just been working on this big deal. It's gonna bring a lot more money to the household for it.
What you doing here, boss? Yeah, just checking to see if you still got it.
You take this work, your partner. I don't want it back.
I've seen the movies, man. I know how this goes.
You see the movie, huh? Did you see Goodfellas? New Jack City?
Everything I do is for you. Like, I just need a little bit more time, man. Fine bullshit. Like I said, he's gonna call any second.
Why don't you take a look at this video? Guess what? It's starring you.
Back at you and closing out the show with your health invite. Dr. K, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I am very anxious to hear your topic today because you always bring us such great information. What's the latest?
Quite frankly, my topic is probably what should be the hottest topic in America. Okay? All the political stuff is not new. The number one topic in America that happened recently is that the age for which they are asking you to get a mammogram, ladies, is 40. Now, let's go to the backstory. It used to be 40.
Okay.
Then now everybody has to understand these are economic calculations made by corporate America. Hard to believe that healthcare is corporate America, but it is. So now it has shifted. The problem is we're human beings. So the only reason why this thing has shifted is because that is how prevalent breast cancer is getting. So now when they do the numbers, they realize getting a mammogram earlier is actually cheaper than getting breast cancer. And so many people are getting breast cancer at such a young age that screening becomes important.
Wow.
We truly have to understand the risk factors for breast cancer. Now, what are those risk factors? Weight, Western diet, animal-based diet, sedentary lifestyle, lack of exercise, diabetes. So in other words, all these diseases are tied together because they're all tied to inflammation. People, excuse me, let me add in vitamin D deficiency. These things are all related to the development of breast cancer. Some people are going to get breast cancer. Some people have the breast cancer gene called the BRCA gene. The BRCA gene has to be turned on. So if we have the BRCA gene, we have to have an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle, maintenance of our weight, exercise regularly, whole foods, plant-based diet. This is critical for our longevity. If we don't have the BRCA gene, we don't want to turn any genes on. So we have the same lifestyle considerations because remember, people from the African diaspora, not only are we getting breast cancer, we are dying of breast cancer in much higher rates. So we really have to live a lifestyle that will help us minimize our risk.
Wow, Dr. K, that's a lot. So you heard her. She talks about the plant-based diet every week. So if you don't know what it is, just tune in every week. She's going to tell you what to eat. I think, Dr. K, the main thing you say is stay out of the middle aisle of the grocery store.
And anything, the meat aisle, the dairy aisle, and the processed foods are actually killing us. And when they reduce, what?
Corporate America is not concerned. They're not concerned. They're concerned about guns killing your children. You know they're not concerned about you getting.
No. And again, they would never have lowered it if the cost of breast cancer made it such that screening earlier than early is important. But people, we are truly.
They got their health insurance. You got to take advantage of it. You got health insurance. Now they're going to screen you at 40. So you know you have to get the screening.
And live a lifestyle with the factors that contribute to the development of breast cancer in mind. Live a lifestyle that could put you in prevention mode. And this is critical. Critical from our children's birth to our own death, which is a lifestyle that leads to the prevention of many diseases. And remember, all these diseases are related.
So you guys,
all of them are related.
Stay tuned every week so you can understand exactly how to think about yourself, your health, and your food. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thank you, Dr. K.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you next week with more information that you know you need to know. Thanks again, Dr. K. See you next week from all of us here at
Thank you.
Impact News.